After analyzing our situation, she was surprised to hear that we had not qualified for a modification earlier, especially since my husband and I both have good incomes. As of right now, I'm still facing foreclosure next month. That would be February. And I know in my heart that this is because of One West's only intent was to foreclose on my home. This bank has had ample opportunities to modify my loan. In fact, they told me that they own the loan. So I know they can't blame this situation on an investor not allowing them to modify my loan. Nobody should have to go through the experience that I've gone through during the past several years with One West Bank. It's been very painful and stressful not knowing if my kids and my family are going to have a home to live in or if it's going to be foreclosed on. I would ask you to remember my experience when you consider whether Mr. Mnuchin is qualified to lead the Department of the Treasury. As the CEO and chair of One West Bank, Mr. Mnuchin had the opportunity to help families like mine with responsible loan modifications. And he didn't. I don't think this is a track record that anybody should be proud of. Thank you, Sylvia, for telling your story. And then there's Christina, a small business owner who owned her own home at the age of 20. I already told you about how Steve Mnuchin's bank ran her in circles until they could foreclose on her house. But now I want you to hear the full story from Christina. Here's what she said. Good afternoon. My name is Christina Clifford. I am hoping that by sharing my story with you today, I can explain why I believe confirming Steve Mnuchin for Treasury Secretary would be a serious mistake for our country. I experienced firsthand what it was like to be subject to One West greed, and I can tell you that the person who ran One West Bank should not be the person responsible for oversight of the U.S. economy. In 2001, when I was 20, I bought my first home, a great condo in Whittier, California, just outside Los Angeles. I was young, but I've always been a motivated self-starter. I am also a self-employed small business owner, my primary source of income. Things were going just fine, and I was never, ever late on my mortgage payments. However, that changed in 2008, like it did for so many of us when the economy took a turn for the worse. My business struggled, and I started relying on credit cards to stay afloat. In March of 2009, I was unable to make my mortgage payment for the first time in 8 years as a homeowner. I called One West directly to see what options I would have for keeping my home. They told me flat out that because I had never been delinquent, they had no way of helping me. In order to get help, they said, I would have to fall behind on my payments. Of course, this was misleading, and I've since found out a common tactic that mortgage lenders use to push people into default. From there, I began the long, long process of loan modification through the Home Affordable Mortgage Program, or HAMP. I sent in numerous documents to One West, and in May, I was offered my first loan modification. I was thrilled. The new payments would fit perfectly in my budget, so I signed the loan modification papers and sent them via FedEx, along with a check for my first payment under the new modified payment amount. In July, I expected One West to send me a statement with the new lower payment amount. Instead, I received a letter saying that they had not received my loan modification paperwork, so the modification terms were no longer valid. I called them, and One West confirmed that they had not received my return loan modification agreement. I knew right away this wasn't right, because they had cashed the check for the first modified payment that was in the same FedEx envelope. That they managed to cash the check but completely neglect the loan modification agreement, again, in the same envelope, is absolutely outrageous. I had no choice but to apply again, this time submitting even more documents. I was told to submit and resubmit many duplicative documents in many different formats. Despite how difficult One West made the process, I did everything they asked because I was determined to keep my home. On August 3rd, 2009, I received a notice of default from One West, but proceeded with my second attempt at modifying my loan. I received my second loan modification offer later that month. The terms were almost identical to the offer they made me in May, so I quickly signed the offer and mailed it in with another check. In October, I got a letter exactly like the one I received earlier, saying that they had not received the loan modification paperwork and the modification offer was no longer valid. Yet, as they did the first time, they cashed the check I sent in with the signed offer. At that point, I felt I had no choice but to get an attorney who worked to get my foreclosure postponed while the loan modification process played out. He spoke with the people at One West, who told him they would postpone the sale of my condo until the loan modification process was completed. This simply wasn't true. On the evening of December 3rd, 2009, I received a knock on my door from a man that introduced himself as the new owner of my property. And in March of 2010, I received a final notice telling me that I had 5 days to leave my apartment, 5 days to pack up the 10 years of my life that I had spent in my home. The reason I'm sharing my story is because there are so many other people out there like me who got left in the dust. Steve Mnuchin profited from people like me, even when we did everything we could to keep our homes. You might say that Steve Mnuchin did not personally authorize One West to cheat me out of my home, but his fortune rose as a direct result of managing a company that routinely engaged in irresponsible behavior. The Treasury Secretary will be tasked with making sure that the American economy is working in a way that benefits all of Americans, not just the top 1%. However, Steve Mnuchin is not that person. He is just the opposite. Please make a statement for people like me and oppose his confirmation as Treasury Secretary. Thank you, Christina. Thank you for coming to Washington. Thank you for submitting your story. Now, these are just 4 stories, 4 experiences among the thousands more like them, all leading to the same simple but startling conclusion. Under Steve Mnuchin's leadership, One West Bank took advantage of homeowners all across the country in the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis. And why did they do it? They did it to make a quick buck. But don't just take my word for it. Paulina Gonzalez, the executive director for the California Reinvestment Coalition, also came to Washington to speak to us. Paulina and her organization have been closely tracking One West's destructive practices for years. And here's what Paulina told us. My name is Paulina Gonzalez. I am the executive director of the California Reinvestment Coalition. Over the past 30 years, CRC has grown to the largest state reinvestment coalition in the country, with a membership of 300 organizations that serve low-income communities and communities of color. It is critically important that our elected representatives and the American public hear directly from people who have lost their homes due to the egregious practices and abuses by One West under Mr. Mnuchin's leadership before deciding on his nomination to the high and important office of Treasury Secretary. I'm going to share some data and information with you in the next few minutes, but know that the wreckage from One West is not really about numbers, data, and legal briefs. It's about the tens of thousands of Americans who have suffered devastating financial and personal losses as a result of One West's abusive foreclosure practices. Whether it's the story of the Minnesota woman who sought a loan modification from One West and returned to her home in a blizzard only to find that her locks were changed? Or the 90-year-old woman who was nearly kicked out of her home for mistakenly paying 27 cents less than the amount One West said she owed? Or the 80-year-old former Christian missionary who was notified at his home that Financial Freedom was foreclosing on him because the bank said they had no record of him living there? The issue is the same. Instead of helping people stay in their homes, Mr. Mnuchin devised a foreclosure machine that used every trick in the book to profit from their suffering. And foreclose he did. CRC and Urban Strategies Council analyzed data showing that One West foreclosed on over 36,000 families in California and 24,000 families nationally. All of these foreclosures occurred after Mr. Mnuchin purchased Indy Mac Bank. In addition, we suspect that One West's reverse mortgage subsidiary, Financial Freedom, has foreclosed on more seniors, widows, widowers, and heirs than any other company participating in the federal home equity conversion mortgage program. A Freedom of Information Act request that we filed with HUD revealed that Financial Freedom had foreclosed on over 16,000 seniors, widows, widowers, and their families, or 39% of all home equity conversion mortgage foreclosures, roughly twice the rate one would expect given the bank's market share. I just want to say that one more time. They foreclosed on seniors, on widows, on widowers, on families at about twice the rate of anyone else doing the same business. Mr. Mnuchin may defend his record by saying he inherited these bad loans, that the foreclosures were inevitable, that his bank followed the law in dealing with his customers. We strongly disagree, and it appears we are not alone. In a CNN story that aired on January 3rd about Mr. Mnuchin and Financial Freedom, a HUD spokesperson was quoted as saying, quote, "While HUD doesn't dispute that it has strict rules for government-backed reverse mortgages, One West had the ability to give survivors more time, but chose not to." Mr. Mnuchin's spokespeople have also praised his modification record, but we are not sure there is much to praise. 2013 data from the Treasury Department shows that One West had among the highest denial rates for the Home Affordable Modification Program, the federal government's main foreclosure prevention effort, HAMP. Under Mr. Mnuchin, One West denied 3/4 of the thousands of loan modification requests that came in from families trying to save their homes. One West was much more likely to deny loan modifications under this program than its peers, such as Bank of America or Wells Fargo. A January 2013 memo from the California Attorney General's office revealed a staff investigation finding of, quote, widespread misconduct at the bank, including backdating thousands of foreclosure documents, improper foreclosure auction credit bidding, which meant the bank could claim tax exemptions that it wasn't entitled to, proceeding with foreclosures without the proper authority to do so, and speeding up foreclosure timelines. All of these practices deprived working families in California a fair chance to stay in their homes. The Treasury Secretary leads our economy. The Secretary helps oversee our banking system and will have much to say about important policies relating to banking, housing, and economic development that will impact all Americans. The country needs a Treasury Secretary who will consider the needs of all Americans, including working-class Americans. Mr. Mnuchin's tenure at One West Bank shows him to work in his interest and in the corporate interest at the great expense and harm to everyday Americans. Thank you, Paulina. I appreciate your sending in this information And I agree. Unfortunately, Mr. Mnuchin's history of oppressive foreclosure practices isn't the only thing that disqualifies him from serving as Secretary of the Treasury. I already told you that Mr. Mnuchin flat out lied to the Senate when he told my colleague, Senator Casey, that his bank didn't engage in certain foreclosure practices. I'd like to share an article from the Columbus Dispatch uncovering the exact practices that Mr. Mnuchin told the United States Senate that his bank never engaged in. Here's what the article says. President Donald Trump's nominee for U.S. Secretary of the Treasury was untruthful with the Senate during the confirmation process, documents uncovered by the Dispatch show. Steve Mnuchin, former chairman and chief executive officer of One West Bank, known for its aggressive foreclosure practices, flatly denied in testimony before the Senate Finance Committee that One West used robo-signing on mortgage documents. But records show the bank utilized the questionable practice in Ohio. Quote, "The guy is just lying. There's no other way to say it," said Bill Faith, executive director of the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. The revelation comes with the committee's vote on whether to confirm Mnuchin's nomination, currently scheduled for Monday night. Robo-signing is the informal term for when a mortgage company employee signs hundreds of foreclosures, swearing they have scrutinized the document as required by law, when in fact they have not. One West Bank did not robo-sign documents, Mnuchin said in response to questions from individual senators, and as the only bank to successfully complete the independent foreclosure review required by the federal banking regulators to investigate allegations of robo-signing, I am proud of our institution's extremely low error rate. I just want to read that one more time. Steve Mnuchin said One West Bank did not robo-sign documents, and he's proud of what he did. But a Dispatch analysis of nearly 4 foreclosure cases filed by One West in Franklin County in 2010 alone shows that the company frequently used robo-signers. The vast majority of the Columbus area cases were signed by 11 different people in Travis County, Texas. Those employees call themselves vice presidents, assistant vice presidents, managers, and assistant secretaries. In 3 local cases, a judge dismissed One West foreclosure proceedings specifically based on inaccurate robo-signings. The Dispatch found more than 1,900 One West foreclosures in the state's 6 largest counties from 2009 to 2015. Carla Duncan, a social worker from Cleveland Heights, was snared by One West's robo-signing machinery. On her way out of town for a short trip in 2010, Duncan stopped by her home to get her mail and found a note from a field inspector for her mortgage company saying that her house was vacant and was going to be boarded up. It wasn't vacant. I was living there, Duncan said. There were curtains on the windows, the radio was playing, and the dog was there. What Duncan didn't know at the time was that One West had begun foreclosure proceedings on her 3-bedroom home, even though she was up to date on her payments. One West refused to accept a loan modification approved by a previous lender that had been purchased by One West, and it wanted to substantially increase Duncan's interest rate and monthly payment and add late fees. The company also put a lockbox on a separate rental property she owned in Cleveland. After hiring former Attorney General Mark Dan, waging a 5-year court battle, and filing personal bankruptcy, Duncan was finally able to get the foreclosures dismissed and keep her home and rental property. She said the experience was devastating. It got to the point I was afraid to open my own door. Court records show that Duncan's mortgage was robo-signed by Erica Johnson-Seck, Vice President of One West Department of Bankruptcy and Foreclosures. From her office in Austin, Texas, Johnson Sek robo-signed an average of 750 foreclosure documents a week, according to a sworn deposition she gave in a Florida case in July 2009. Under oath, Johnson Sek acknowledged that she did not read the document she was signing, taking only about 30 seconds to sign her name. To speed up the process, Johnson Sek said she shortened her first name in her signature to just E. She said in the deposition that One West practice was to review about just 10% of the foreclosure documents for accuracy. Dan, who now specializes in representing clients who have problems with banks and other lenders after he was forced to resign as Attorney General nearly 10 years ago, said Mnuchin's businesses were a, quote, major offender in problem mortgages. Dan said Mnuchin's firms were known for dual tracking, which means pursuing foreclosure simultaneously as they allegedly worked with homeowners, fabricating documents, and other tactics that caused unbelievable devastation in people's lives. In 2010, federal laws were changed, enabling borrowers victimized by lenders to sue them. Dan said he worries that Mnuchin, as Treasury Secretary, would quietly work to repeal reforms, collectively known as Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. That appears to be the case. It has been over 6 years since the passage of Dodd-Frank, and it seems like an appropriate time to review all of the regulations from Dodd-Frank to understand their impact on the market, investors, small businesses, and economic growth, Mnuchin said in a written answer to the Senate. The dispatch analysis showed thousands of Ohio homeowners, including 245 in Franklin County, found themselves in One West's crosshairs when they defaulted on their loans, the majority of them with high interest rates. Many mortgages had terms that housing and financial experts view as predatory: prepayment penalties, interest-only loans, and no-money down loans. Mnuchin was labeled by critics at the time as the foreclosure king. That's it, the foreclosure king. That's who is just hours away from becoming the chief financial officer of our country. Steve Mnuchin is a Wall Street insider who has spent his career looking out for himself and his billionaire buddies. He led a bank that forced thousands of hardworking Americans out of their homes, and he lied to the United States Senate. The Constitution demands that senators advise and consent on the president's nominations. Well, here is my advice. Steve Mnuchin is not fit to be Secretary of Treasury. He will not look out for the millions of Americans still recovering from the recession, like Heather and Christina. He certainly won't defend the interests of middle-class families like the McCrearys and the Olivers. And I know he will not stand up to Wall Street and fight to protect the interests of all Americans. I urge my colleagues to oppose Mr. Mnuchin's nomination. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Madam President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I would ask to dispense with the calling of the quorum.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I would also ask unanimous consent that Daniel McCartney, a fellow in my office, be granted the privileges of the floor for this session of Congress.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise in opposition to the nomination of Stephen Mnuchin to be the Secretary of the Treasury. No cabinet official can have such a profound impact on our economy, on family budgets, on taxes, and on consumer protection as the Secretary of the Treasury. It is a job of immense reach that requires a steady hand, a commitment to fairness, and a deep knowledge of our nation's financial markets and the rules that protect the savings and investments of middle-class Americans. In light of this reality, I do not think Mr. Mnuchin meets these requirements. I know that for many of my fellow Rhode Islanders and for many Americans, the economy is not producing the jobs and wages they want and they need. I share that sentiment, and I've pushed for job and wage policies like the minimum wage, paid leave, and health care that can help struggling families cope. And I've pushed for job creation by putting people to work rebuilding our nation's roads and bridges and transit systems, schools, and new housing. But I think it is important that everyone in this chamber take a step back and understand where our economy was, where it is today, and what is at stake. In 2007, the housing market began to collapse. One measure of the housing market is a seriously delinquent rate, which is the percentage of loans that are 90 days or more past due or in the process of foreclosure. And here are just a few examples of the hardest hit states. 13.2% in Arizona in December of 2009. 9.63% in Ohio in December of 2009. 20.61% in Florida in March 2010. Now, by the end of President Obama's term in office, here are the seriously delinquent rates for those same states. 1.35% for Arizona in September of 2016. 3.59% in Ohio in September 2016. And 4.14% in Florida in September 2016. Florida alone went from 20% to 4% because of the policies, the programs that were initiated by the President and supported by this Congress. In 2007, we also noticed that the unemployment rate began to skyrocket. Again, here's what that meant in a few states at their highest unemployment rates. 11.2% in Arizona in November 2009. 13.6% in Nevada in December 2010, 11% in Ohio in January 2010, 11.2% in Florida in January 2010, and in my home state, double-digit unemployment rates also. But by the end of President Obama's term in office, here are the preliminary unemployment rates for those states as of December 2016. 4.8% in Arizona, 5.1% in Nevada, 4.9% in Ohio, 4.9% in Florida. We've seen improvement across the nation. Now, I urge my colleagues to take all of this into account when they consider Mr. Mnuchin. There are reasons, many reasons. These are sobering numbers, and behind each of these numbers is an individual or a family, our constituents, who suffered real and serious harm. We owed it to our constituents to do something so that these generational losses would be prevented from happening again. We came out of a deep abyss through difficult work, through cooperative efforts. We've reached a point where we're poised, I hope, to continue forward, and we don't want to go back. That was at the heart of our work on the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. It was to learn the lessons from this catastrophe so that we would never endure another in our history. Unfortunately, for some of my constituents in Rhode Island and others around the country, the aftershocks of that financial crisis still have not fully dissipated. We are still living, in some respects, with what happened. There are still too many looking for a decent paying job or facing gut-wrenching financial decisions like whether to turn off the heat or skip feeding the family another day just to make ends meet. Indeed, one of my constituents recently wrote, "My wife and I lost nearly half our assets in the 2008 financial crisis. Over 8 years later, and our house is still worth less than the mortgage that remains on it. We are both professionals, and will have to stay that way until we are 75 in order to come close to the standard of living we enjoy now during our retirement. The financial reforms enacted under Dodd-Frank and Obama's regulation that requires financial advisors and brokers to act in the client's best interests are critical to my family's well-being and to the health of the U.S. economy. I would like to know how you plan to defeat any attempts to unravel these rules, given the clear threat that Trump poses to our economy and the losses I've already suffered due to bankers' greed and incompetence without these rules. I feel better off putting my money in my basement, and we'll do exactly that. At least then we won't lose half of what we own." Those are words of a professional family in Rhode Island and who have seen this struggle firsthand. And they asked us the question, what are we going to do to protect the reforms and the advances we've made that have been manifested in economic statistics that I've shared with you, and manifested not as robustly as we hope, but certainly manifested to a significant degree in the lives of families across this country. So as you can see, for this Rhode Island family and for many others, the law we put in place to staunch the bleeding and stabilize the financial system is a critical help. But some have so demonized Dodd-Frank that they would have you believe otherwise. That may be why its opponents prefer calling it Dodd-Frank instead of its full name, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, because it's about reforming Wall Street and protecting consumers. It's a lot easier to be against something called Dodd-Frank than it is to be against Wall Street reform or consumer protection. But as you just heard in my constituents' own words, Dodd-Frank is, quote, in these words, critical to my family's well-being and the health of the U.S. economy. And the question I have to answer as his senator is whether Mr. Mnuchin will support Dodd-Frank, push efforts to further reform Wall Street, and place as his highest priority the protection of the consumers as the next Treasury Secretary. Based on a review of Mr. Mnuchin's record, the answer to me is a very clear no, he will not. As chairman of One West Bank, Mr. Mnuchin made a fortune employing questionable foreclosure practices that made the financial crisis worse for families and seniors. And what is particularly worrisome is that One West engaged in so-called robo-signing, where companies cut crucial corners by not properly reviewing or even bothering to read foreclosure documents. Indeed, according to one news report, Erica Johnson Seck, Vice President of One West Department of Bankruptcy and Foreclosures, robo-signed an average of 750 foreclosure documents a week, according to a sworn deposition she gave in a Florida case in July 2009. Under oath, Johnson Seck acknowledged that she did not read the documents she was signing, taking only about 30 seconds to sign her name. To speed up the process, Johnson Seck said she shortened her first name on her signature to just an E. She said in the deposition that One West's practice was to review just 10% of the foreclosure documents for accuracy. As part of the confirmation process, when asked whether his company engaged in robo-signing, Mr. Mnuchin responded that One West did not robo-sign documents. However, it's not clear this was the case, and not just because of Ms. Johnson's Seck deposition. Quoting from a Bloomberg article written by one of our finest Rhode Island citizens, Joe Nocera, he writes, quote, "But here's the clincher. In 2011, the man who now says his bank never robo-signed documents signed a consent order with the Office of Thrift Supervision, which had accused it of, you guessed it, robo-signing." Disturbingly, Mr. Mnuchin's response on this issue either raises troubling questions about his management capabilities or his willingness to be forthright, or potentially both. Ironically, Mr. Mnuchin's confirmation process mirrors his career at least in one way. While the Senate Finance Committee normally requires at least one Democratic senator to be present in order to vote in committee on a nominee, the normal rules were suspended so that Mr. Mnuchin could be reported out of the committee for consideration by the full Senate. In other words, the rules were not followed. Special shortcuts were created for him, and much like the robo-signing that occurred at 1 West, Mr. Mnuchin is on a path to robo-confirmation without a full and proper vetting by the United States Senate. And the last thing this body should be doing is robo-stamping Mr. Mnuchin's nomination so that he, as Treasury Secretary, can change the rules and rig the system in favor of the insiders at the expense of working-class Americans who are working overtime just to, in many cases, make ends barely meet. For example, Mr. Mnuchin has stated that his first priority would be enactment of the Trump tax plan. This plan makes deep unfunded cuts to revenue, and roughly half of the reduced tax burden is just for the top 1%. The wealthy who don't have to worry about how much of a gallon of milk costs, or the cost to ride the bus, or to fill the gas tank. We have seen what huge tax cuts for the wealthy do to the economy. Just look at the economy in the late 2000s and the deficit. The economic plan endorsed by President Trump and Mr. Mnuchin will not help the middle class, but will only further skew the economy in favor of the wealthy and well-connected and do precious little for job growth. In addition, the incoming Treasury Secretary will be tasked with rolling back the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act in support of the president, who said, in the president's words, "We expect to be cutting a lot out of Dodd-Frank because, frankly, I have so many people, friends of mine, that have nice businesses and they can't borrow money. They just can't get any money because the banks just won't let them borrow because of the rules and regulations in Dodd-Frank." Indeed, Mr. Mnuchin seems all too eager to assist because he himself has said that, quote, "We want to strip back parts of Dodd-Frank that prevents banks from lending," close quote. We are simply not seeing this, though. According to J.P. Morgan's chief financial officer, Marianne Lake, on an analyst conference call last month, loan growth remains robust. According to Bloomberg, at J.P. Morgan, the biggest U.S. bank, core loans increased 10% to $806.2 billion last year, with gains in every category, including credit cards and wholesale debt. Bank of America cores total loans climbed 1.1% to $906.8 billion, while Wells Fargo and Company grew 5.6% to $986 billion. And according to the same article, banks now have a record $9.1 trillion of loans outstanding. Based on this, it seems that big bank lending is actually doing well. And maybe the reason the president's friends have not gotten loans is because they've borrowed too much and possibly going bankrupt too much, and the mega banks want to be careful about who they lend to. Indeed, Anat Admati, a finance professor at Stanford University and a member of the FDIC's Systemic Resolution Advisory Committee, notes that, quote, "The claim that regulations are prohibiting lending is simply false. The banks have plenty of money and can raise more from investors like other businesses if they have worthy loans to make. If they don't lend, it's because they choose not to lend and instead do many other things." This is the key point. According to Bloomberg, banks don't actually hold capital. In banking, capital refers to the funding they receive from shareholders. Every penny of it can be loaned out. A 5% minimum capital requirement means that 5% of the bank's liabilities has to be equity, while the rest can be deposits or other borrowing. The more equity a bank has, the smaller its risk of failing when losses pile up. Given the protection that equity provides, you're left to wonder why Mr. Mnuchin and President Trump are so anti-capital, anti-equity. because it's the best safeguard there is for the financial system. Indeed, from that same Bloomberg article, quote, former Goldman Sachs partner Philip D. Murphy, who was a member of the bank's management committee, with National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn and Treasury Secretary nominee Stephen Mnuchin, says he's mystified by the changes they're pushing. To think that undoing these regulations is going to lead to a better result is folly, said Murphy, who, by the way, I will disclose is seeking a Democratic nomination in this year's New Jersey gubernatorial race. In his words, the fox is in the henhouse, and that's what this is. This is people on Wall Street who should know better. For an administration that campaigned on a claim of dismantling a rigged system, I am confused why President Trump nominated Mr. Mnuchin to be his economic quarterback for working-class Americans. Mr. Mnuchin has spent his professional life spotting value, and he's done it quite well for himself. But despite this ability to value assets, Mr. Mnuchin still seems puzzled about how to value the assets that matter most to working-class Americans. My constituents don't need fancy Wall Street calculators or formulas to understand that there is a value and a benefit to reforming Wall Street and keeping reckless greed in check. There is a value and a benefit to protecting consumers and their hard-earned wages. And there is a value and a benefit to keeping a family in their homes and avoiding foreclosure. Indeed, an individual who made his fortune aggressively foreclosing on his fellow Americans does not possess the right values, in my view, to be our Treasury Secretary. Based on his record, I am not convinced Mr. Mnuchin is capable of draining the swamp, and I fear he may end up further rigging the system in favor of the 1% at the expense of working-class Americans. For all of these reasons, I do not support Mr. Mnuchin's nomination, and I urge all of my colleagues to join me in voting no. And with that, Madam President, I would yield the floor, and I will also note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I would ask the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I would also ask a unanimous consent that I be allowed to yield the remainder of my time to Senator Wyden of Oregon.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. And with that, I would once again note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Ohio.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask Madam Consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. American families, hardworking American families, need a Treasury Secretary who will work for them, not for Wall Street. Remember the tenor of the 2016 campaign when candidate Trump, at every rally, spoke forcefully about draining the swamp. What we thought he meant was that he would drain the swamp, that he would not be hiring a whole bunch of Wall Street executives and Goldman Sachs employees and other bankers who help drive the economy into ditch, to actually stay away from them. In fact, we've seen the opposite. It's become obvious that the Treasury Secretary designee, Steve Mnuchin, is not about hardworking American families, but he's about working for Wall Street.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Treasury
the President
Secretary has
of the
an
United
enormous-
States and the Prime Minister of Japan.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister Abe, on behalf of the American people, I welcome you to the very famous White House. You honor us with your presence. This is one of our earliest visits from a foreign leader, and I am truly glad that it could be from such an important and steadfast ally. The bond between our two nations and the friendship between our two peoples runs very, very deep. This administration is committed to bringing those ties even closer. We are committed to the security of Japan and all areas under its administrative control, and to further strengthening our very crucial alliance. The U.S.-Japan alliance is the cornerstone of peace and stability in the Pacific region. It is important that both Japan and the United States continue to invest very heavily in the alliance to build up our defense and our defensive capabilities, which under our mutual leadership will become stronger and stronger. And as time goes by, ultimately they will be impenetrable. We face numerous challenges, and bilateral cooperation is essential. Our country is committed to being an active and fully engaged partner. We will work together to promote our shared interests, of which we have many, in the region, including freedom from navigation and of navigation, and defending against the North Korean missile and nuclear threat, both of which I consider a very, very high priority. On the economy, we will seek a trading relationship that is free, fair, and reciprocal, benefiting both of our countries. The vibrant exchange between us is a true blessing. Japan is a proud nation with a rich history and culture, and the American people have profound respect for your country and its traditions. I also want to take this opportunity, Mr. Prime Minister, to thank you and the people of Japan for hosting our armed forces. Working together, our two countries have the ability to bring greater harmony, stability, and prosperity to the Pacific region and beyond, improving countless lives in the process. We are committed to that goal. Highly committed. Prime Minister Abe, on behalf of the United States of America, I thank you for being with us today. We will soon be traveling to the great state of Florida, where I know we will have a long and very successful talk negotiations, and a very, very productive weekend. Mr. Prime Minister.
This is the fourth time in 6 months for me to visit the United States. The last time was in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, at the end of last year. I am indeed sincerely grateful for the always heartwarming welcome accorded to me by the American people. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to President Trump. Donald, you must have been very busy in this very important the period of 100 days after your inauguration. And thank you very much for inviting me over to the White House. My name is Abe, but in the United States, some people mistakenly pronounce my name as Abe, but that is not bad, because even in Japan, everybody knows the name of that great president. That farmer carpenter's son can become a president, and that fact, 150 years ago, surprised the Japanese who were still under the shogunate rule. The Japanese opened their eyes to democracy. United States is the champion of democracy. Donald, President, you are excellent businessman, but you have never been in the Congress or being a governor. You have not experienced being in the public office, but you have fought the uphill struggle and fight for more than a year in the election campaign to become a new president. And this is the dynamism of democracy. I would like to celebrate and congratulate Donald being sworn in as the president. The United States is a country having the largest number of chances, opportunities in the world. That has always been the case right now, as well as going forward. This will never change. And that is the reason why automotive industries and other Japanese businesses have built factories all over the United States to engage in local production here. Last year, from Japan to the United States, there have been more than $150 billion of new investment being made into the United States. And those Japanese businesses have created large number of jobs. The mutually beneficial economic relations have been built by Japan and the United States. With President Trump taking on the leadership, I'm sure there will be major scale infrastructure investment will be made, including the fast speed train. Those of you who have rode on the Japanese Shinkansen, I'm sure you would appreciate the speed, the comfort, and safety. With the latest maglev technology from the Washington, D.C. To New York, where Trump Tower exists, only 1 hour would it take if you ride the maglev train from Washington, D.C. to New York. Japan, with our high level of technical capability, we will be able to contribute to President Trump's growth strategy. There will be even more new jobs being born in the United States. To further deepen the bilateral economic relations between Deputy Prime Minister Aso and Vice President Pence, there will be a cross-sectoral dialogue to be held, and we have agreed on this. And furthermore, in Asia-Pacific, where we see dramatic growth, to expand free trade and investment, this will be a big chance for both Japan and the United States. But of course, it must be done in a fair manner. Never should a state-owned company backed by state capital should not make any economic intervention. Free ride on intellectual property should not be condoned. In Asia-Pacific region, with Japan and U.S. taking on the leadership to create free and fair market based upon rules should be built. I and President Trump has confirmed on our strong will to do so. The cornerstone of peace and prosperity in Asia-Pacific, that is the strong Japan-U.S. alliance. And this is an unwavering ties between our two countries. I and President Trump will work together to further strengthen our alliance. We have shared this strong resolve. As we see increasingly difficult security environment, we have confirmed that U.S.-Japan Security Pact Article 5 will be applied to Senkaku Islands. The United States will strengthen its presence in the region, and under the banner of the proactive contribution to peace, Japan will play a greater role. At the same time, we will maintain the deterrence and also to proceed on reducing the impact. We will follow through on the realignment of the U.S. forces in Japan. And Henoko's relocation to Henoko of the MCAS Futenma is the only solution, and Japan and U.S. will continue to work closely on this. On North Korea, we would strongly demand North Korea to abandon nuclear and ballistic missile the program and not to make any more provocations. And we have completely agreed on the importance of the early solution for the abduction issue in East China Sea, South China Sea, and Indian Ocean. Everywhere we need to maintain the freedom of navigation and rule of law, and such international order that must have to be maintained. Japan and United States have confirmed that we will strongly protest any use of force as well as the coercion to change the status quo. I and the President will address not only bilateral but regional issues, and we have had a very frank exchange of views on the peace and prosperity of the world that we should contribute. For any form of terrorism should be strongly condemned, and we would cooperate in our fight against terrorism. Japan will, of course, exercise a commensurate role in this regard. And furthermore, the regional conflict, the refugees, poverty, and infectious diseases, there are many challenges faced by the world, which will be a serious issue to threaten the peace and stability for Japan as well as the United States. But Japan and the United States and the international community must work hand in hand in order to solve these questions. Of course, there are disagreements, but we should not close down the dialogue just by pointing to the differences and ignoring the common interests and common goals. We need to have a dialogue because there are disagreements. What we mostly desire, what is most desired by those who are challenging the existing international order is to just focus on differences. We should not close the dialogue. Japan have for 4 years, I have consistently fought through on our foreign policy. Now, whatever the challenge and difficulty ahead of us, I and President Trump will continue our dialogue to seek shared solutions. And after lunch, I'm looking forward for a weekend in Florida with Donald. We will play golf together. My scores in golf is not up to the level of Donald at all, but my policy is never up, never in, always aiming for the cup, never to just go with the shortcuts and the chops. Those are the words never found in my dictionary. But in a relaxed atmosphere, I hope to take time to discuss with Donald on the future of the world, future of the region, and future of Japan and the United States. Thank you.
Very much. We'll take a few questions. unless you don't want to ask any questions, if that's possible. Maybe we'll start. Where is Daniel Halper, New York Post? Daniel?
I'm curious about yesterday's ruling in the Ninth Circuit Court. Has it caused you to rethink your use of executive power, and how will you respond, and will you sign new executive orders or perhaps a new travel ban? And Mr. Prime Minister, I'm curious about your reaction to America's withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. Do you think that that's weakened America's position in Asia, and how do you envision any sort of trade deal with the president working out?
Well, your question was unrelated to what we're here for today, but I'll answer it. We are going to keep our country safe. We are going to do whatever is necessary to keep our country safe. We had a decision which we think we'll be very successful with. It shouldn't have taken this much time because safety is a primary reason. One of the reasons I'm standing here today is the security of our country. The voters felt that I would give it the best security. So we'll be doing something very rapidly having to do with additional security for our country. You'll be seeing that sometime next week. In addition, we will continue to go through the court process, and ultimately I have no doubt that we'll win that particular case.
Now, in the world, we are also facing the issues of the refugees and terrorism. We need to work closely together on these global issues. Japan have always played our own role, but going forward, we would continue to work with the international community to execute our responsibility in a commensurate manner. And each of our country has immigration control scheme, as well as policy on immigration, as well as refugees. These are to do with domestic affairs of that country, so I would refrain from making any comments.
Okay, Blake Berman. Fox, Blake Berman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to pick up where Daniel left off, if you don't mind. You said earlier this week, and I'm quoting for you, you said, "I've learned a lot in the last 2 weeks, and terrorism is a far greater threat than the people of our country understand, but we're going to take care of it." Based off of what you have learned, and now knowing that your executive order is at least temporarily on hold, do you still feel as confident now as you have been at any point that you and the administration will be able to protect the homeland? And Mr. Prime Minister, thank you. I would just like to pick off again on what Daniel had asked about TPP. Do you feel it's a mistake that the United States has at least signaled its intention to withdraw from the deal? Thank you both.
I feel totally confident that we will have tremendous security for the people of the United States. We will be extreme vetting, which is a term that I developed early in my campaign because I saw what was happening. And while I've been president, which is just for a very short period of time, I've learned tremendous things that you could only learn, frankly, if you were in a certain position, namely president. And there are tremendous threats to our country. We will not allow that to happen. I can tell you that right now. We will not allow that to happen. So we'll be going forward. We'll be doing things to continue to make our country safe. It will happen rapidly, and we will not allow people into our country who are looking to do harm to our people. We will allow lots of people into our country that will love our people and do good for our country. It's always going to be that way, at least during my administration. I can tell you that.
TPP については
On TPP, of course, we are fully aware of President Trump's decision. On economic issues, we will be discussing at the working lunch to follow. As for Japan and the United States, trade and investment as well as economic relations. How can we develop and grow our relationship? As I have already mentioned, Deputy Prime Minister Aso and Vice President Pence will create a new framework for dialogue. And I am quite optimistic that the good results will be seen from the dialogue. Now, for the free and fair common set of rules to be created for the free trade regime in the region, and that was the purpose of TPP, and that the importance have not changed. I myself believe that.
Okay.
How does that?
ございます。NHK の原と申します。
Thank you. My name is Hara from NHK. I have a question to Prime Minister Abe. Now, for the automotive market in Japan, as well as foreign exchange of Japan, in the prior remarks, there have been discrepancy in your positions. So at the summit meeting, what were the discussions? And were you able to narrow down the gap? And President Trump had said that he will make United States a great country. What is meant by the great country? And Prime Minister, what do you mean when you say United States is a great ally for you? Now, with the birth of the Trump administration, the new genesis will be built between Japan and U.S. in economic relations. In order to put forward such strong message, I have proposed to launch a new framework for economic dialogue, and we were able to agree on this. As for sectoral discussions, we will be having a discussion at our working lunch, in any case, between President Trump and I myself on Japan and U.S. economic relations. We have already agreed that we will have Vice President Pence and Deputy Prime Minister Aso to discuss fully on the economic relations between our two countries. And we are looking forward for the good results to ensue from the debate between the experts. As for the foreign exchange, we will have Secretary of Treasury and Minister of Finance will continue their close communication for the United States to become a great nation. The various roles played by the United States and the responsibility to go with it. The world over is faced with increasing uncertainty that the United States will become a great America and become a great and strong ally would be good for Japan. And for Japan and U.S. alliance to be further strengthened would be good not only for our two nations, but also contribute to the peace and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific. And the United States to become even greater. We will welcome that.
Thank you. I will say that, and you've seen it, ever since I won the election and became president-elect, I've been telling companies, car companies and other companies, many companies, come back into the United States. And they've been coming back in. And big announcements are going to be made over the next short period of time. Some of you already know what those announcements are. We've lost a lot of our factories, a lot of our plants, and those factories and those plants will be coming back, and jobs will be coming back to Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and North Carolina and so many other places where we've lost so many jobs. And those are the people that were so good to me, and now I'm being good to them. So we've had a tremendous number of announcements. We've had Ford and General Motors and many, many others. Intel yesterday made a major announcement, and they did that because of what is happening with our tax structure, which is going along very well, and we'll be having some very big news over the next short period of time. But we are a nation of tremendous potential, and the expression, "Make America Great Again," I will tell you, and I will add very strongly and with great assurity, it will be greater than ever before. And I just want to thank the Prime Minister for a friendship. You know, we developed a great friendship when we met in New York City at Trump Tower. We spoke for a long, long period of time. And when I greeted him today at the car, I was saying, I shook hands, but I grabbed him and hugged him because that's the way we feel. We have a very, very good bond, very, very good chemistry. I'll let you know if it changes, but I don't think it will. So I just want to thank the Prime Minister for being here. We're going to be meeting your wife in a very short period of time, and I look very much forward to that. And I want to thank everybody in the room. We're going to have a tremendous relationship, long-term relationship of mutual benefit with Japan. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Yes, certainly. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. From Sankei Shimbun, my name is Takita. I have a question to President Trump. Obama administration, under the rebalance to Asia, have emphasized Asia, but China is taking hardline stance in South China Sea as well as China Sea, and North Korea has went on the missiles and nuclear development. So some countries in Asia are concerned over commitment of United States in Asia. So against this backdrop, as was mentioned earlier, for the Trump administration, for the situations in Asia, how would you respond to the increasing difficulty here? And President, you have repeatedly stated about China taking on the currency, foreign exchange policies which are not good for the United States. Do you think that eventually it will change in the future?
I had a very, very good conversation, as most of you know, yesterday with the president of China. It was a very, very warm conversation. I think we are on the process of getting along very well, and I think that will also be very much of a benefit to Japan. So we had a very, very good talk last night and discussed a lot of subject. It was a long talk. And we are working on that as we speak. We have conversations with various representatives of China. I believe that will all work out very well for everybody, China, Japan, the United States, and everybody in the region. As far as the currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field. Because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things. And we will be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our country. But it has to be fair, and we will make it fair. I think the United States is going to be an even bigger player than it is right now by a lot when it comes to trade. A lot of that will have to do with our tax policy, which you'll be seeing in the not-too-distant future. We'll have an incentive-based policy, much more so than we have right now. Right now, we don't even know, nobody knows what policy we have. But we're going to have a very much incentive-based policy. We're working with Congress, working with Paul Ryan, working with Mitch McConnell, and I think people are going to be very, very impressed. We're also working very much, and this has a lot to do with business, on health care, where we can get great health care for our country at a much reduced price, both to the people receiving the health care and to our country, because our country is paying so much, and Obamacare, as you know, is a total and complete disaster. So we're going to end up with tremendous health care at a lower price, and I think people are going to be extremely happy. Difficult process, but once we get going, and as you know, Tom Price was just approved a few hours ago, so we finally have our secretary, and now we get down to the final strokes. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Mr. Prime Minister. What an honor. What a great honor it is. And let's go to Florida.
All right, folks, thank you very much for watching and choosing us as your stream of choice. That was President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And I think it was very constructive. President Trump understands that we need to have a good relationship with Japan because we're going to have a rocky relationship with China. So it's always good to have some allies still in the Asian region. So today we're going to have 2 more streams coming up. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a White House presser, so we're going to stream that live. Also, tonight we have a breaking news. No, actually, it's a news podcast, but we might have some breaking news in it too. So we have a news podcast tonight. 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. So make sure that you guys join us for our podcast. Again, it's at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. So make sure, don't miss it. It's pretty good. A lot of people have been giving us a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback. So that's always a very good thing. Thank you very much, everyone. If you're new to our community, we encourage you that you subscribe to this channel. We stream all the President Trump administration events, all of the pressers, Senate hearings. Now that the travel ban is going into the Supreme Court, we will stream that too here live. So thank you very much. And I hope that you guys, like I said, I hope you guys join the community by hitting the subscribe button. Also, hit the little bell next to it so you can get a heads up on when we go live. That's always a good thing. And I hope to see you guys here later. And also, if you would like to help out the channel, there's a few ways of doing it. Sharing our links, sharing our videos, our streams is the most important thing anybody can do. And it's absolutely free. All you have to do is just copy and paste whatever I put on the chat, put it on social media, and you guys have helped us immensely. If you guys would like to help us by contributing, there's a link to a coffee mug that we're selling. It's a Golden State Times coffee mug. Check it out. A lot of people like it. They're starting to ship within the next few weeks. Our campaign is almost done on there, so make sure to go and pick up one of your coffee mugs today. There's only a certain amount that we have to sell. If we don't meet the quota, then they won't get printed, and the people that order them will not get them in the mail because it's just the way that the campaign works. So if you would like to pick one up, they'll be in the description below. Click on the link. You can go check it out. We encourage you that you pick one up today and you help out the channel, keep operations going, keep live streams going, all that stuff. If you don't want to get a coffee mug and you just want to contribute to the community, I don't know, $1 or whatever, there's also a link to our PayPal. It helps us continue. We stream every single day. We upload breaking news, all that good stuff. So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope that you guys stay here with us. And we're going to keep going strong for the next 8 years. Nothing's going to stop us. We're going to continue bringing you breaking news. We're going to continue bringing you live streams. And we're going to follow President Trump and his administration all the way to the very last day of his presidency 8 years from now. So don't miss it. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all the moderators that came out. Thank you very much to all the moderators that came out today. You guys keep the chat clean, enjoyable for everyone. We do not put up with trolls on this stream. This stream is not a sanctuary city. We do not allow anybody to come into our chat and troll because we want our chat to be a constructive place to come and speak about politics, news, anything that is going on, anything that you guys have heard, everything that has to do with administration or with politics. So by trolls coming in here and trying to disrupt that, we do not allow it at all. We ban trolls on the spot. Again, we do appreciate and we do support freedom of speech, but there's a big difference between freedom of speech and saying fuck Trump or fuck his administration or whatever. See, that's not free speech. That's just your opinion. And this is a pro-Trump channel. So we try to keep the conversation going when it comes to the administration because that's what we're watching on the screen. See, there's many other streams on YouTube, but almost all of them are sanctuary streams. This is not. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope to see you guys here next time. Peace.